Welcome to the Athletic Fantasy Cheat Sheet presented by Jock Market, where daily fantasy sports becomes a stock exchange. You can download the Jock Market app now in the App Store, and that includes you on Android devices as well. I'm Derek VanRiper here along with Jake Ciely, Brandon Funston, and Michael Beller. Ed Malyon will join us shortly. Getting you ready for Week 13. This is the last push to get into the fantasy playoffs in a lot of leagues, so we're here to help you along the way. Send your questions via Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're watching us this morning. We'll answer as many of those as we can. Try to keep them as simple as possible, too. The toughest decision you've got in your lineup will help as many people as we can. Good morning, gentlemen. Let's talk about a few injury situations. Jake, let's start with the Dolphins, where Tua Tagovailoa should be back under center for Miami. So what kinds of adjustments did you make with Tua back this week?
Yeah, I didn't touch the running back situation because it's Myles Gaskin and basically nobody else. This team has proven that they don't want to run with Patrick Laird. So I think that Gaskin, fortunately for people who waited, is walking right back into 20 touches. So the wide receiver position, I moved Parker down a little bit. I had him as a mid-level wide receiver 2. Just pushed him to low wide receiver 2 because it's still volume, still a terrific matchup. The ancillary pieces, you're not getting too interested in. And Gesicki takes a hit again, like he has for pretty much the entire year, even with Fitzpatrick. He had been pretty hit or miss. So Gesicki, for me, falls down to fringe tight end 1. He's now in the conversation with the Rudolphs of the world and Fant and stuff like that. But Fitzpatrick is obviously the big drop in difference there. I moved Tua all the way up to the conversation like QB 16 with Phillip Rivers and Jared Goff.
Yeah, Gesicki, Fant, Ferkser, that's the world I'm living in my home league. Got to make a decision there. It's a small league, so a couple of those guys, of course, are available on the waiver wire. Brandon, I want to ask you, Chris Carson didn't have the role we expected when he returned last week. Do you expect a bigger workload for Carson this time around?
Yeah, if you saw the game, they were working Carlos Hyde in there. I kind of expected that with Carson being out so long and Carlos Hyde looking so good the week before. Now Carlos Hyde has turf toe and he's questionable. And I think this is the week that you'll see Chris Carson get appreciable touches. He's played 7 games. He's had 4 of those games in which he's had single-digit carries. I think he gets up into probably the mid-teens in terms of carries, and he's been excellent as a receiver so far this year. So, I mean, this is a guy that in half PPR leagues is averaging over a fantasy point per touch, which is fantastic rate. So just any more touches for him, you can expect pretty solid things. I have him ranked as an RB1 this week.
Yeah, I think he gets there volume-wise, so I think you're right to have him in that range. Beller, I want to get to you. Irv Smith, Jonnu Smith among the tight ends who are out, and Anthony Ferkser, maybe one of the viable replacements if you're scrambling. But do you have any other sleepers at the tight end position if someone's in rough shape at the position?
Hey, Ferkser is actually the first guy who I would look to. Got a high-scoring expectation for the Titans and the Browns today. Actually, surprisingly, the highest over-under on the board, and I think it's not a bad place to invest. So I think Ferkser is a good guy to look to. Another guy who you could look to, how about Trey Burton? This guy's been scoring touchdowns week after week for the Colts, and we know Jonathan Taylor back in the mix for them this week. Still want to believe that they're going to get Michael Pittman more involved in the offense in a way that actually translates to bottom-line production. But Trey Burton has been someone who Phillip Rivers has turned to once they've gotten in close. I think that's another route you could go if you're scrambling at tight end.
Yeah, I do like the Titans matchup with the Browns. Mm-hmm. Highest scoring game on the board, like you said. Surprising to see it, but leaning into that, hoping for some touchdown upside. We're going to go game by game this week, kind of dig into every situation. We're going to start with the Bengals-Dolphins matchup. Only 44 total plays run by the Bengals last week against the Giants, Jake. This was a team that had thrown it 60 times with Joe Burrow earlier this season. Do you think this is just sort of a change in pace and change in philosophy, or is this also just the result of running Brandon Allen out there at quarterback and lacking efficiency to pick up first downs and max out offensively?
That's really all it is. It's just Joe Burrow to Brandon Allen. Like, Joe Burrow was one of the highest regarded quarterbacks as a rookie that we've seen in a couple of years, and for good reason of what he immediately did to this offense. Joe Burrow was a little outplayed by Justin Herbert this year, but you take Justin Herbert out of that lineup and you go back to Tyrod Taylor, and it's going to be slower pace. And that's Tyrod Taylor, and it's going to be less pass happy, less pass efficient. So we're talking about Brandon Allen, who is a journeyman backup at best quarterback. Shouldn't be starting NFL games, unfortunately. I'm not trying to pound on the guy, but be honest, like, this is just what it is. You don't expect more offense, don't expect more efficiency, don't expect anything more than what you saw last week.
As far as the pass catchers go, I mean, there was a point where we were looking at 3 Bengals receivers as viable because of the target distribution and the number of plays they were running. Interesting to see Tyler Boyd under 5K on DraftKings this week, 4,700. Beller, would you play Tyler Boyd in DFS? Where do you feel he belongs in season long? Is he kind of fringy this week, given the instability now at quarterback?
Wouldn't play him in DFS and fringy at best, I think. I mean, we saw it last week, 3-6 for 15. Three catches, 6 targets, 15 yards for Tyler Boyd with Brandon Allen as the starter. I just don't think you can trust him. I think you have to be in dire straits if you're going to trot him out there in a season-long league. I have him in one season-long league, and he wasn't even part of my thought process this week because I just don't see how you trust really anyone in that offense with Brandon Allen. We saw it last week, how bad they were. You can go back to his 3 starts with Denver last season. It's just not going to be a very good offensive efficient market for him, and I think that makes it pretty easy to stay away from Cincinnati as a whole.
This is a Dolphins offense, by the way, with an implied total of nearly 27 points this week. So there are a few popular Dolphins. Jake mentioned before, Myles Gaskin kind of has the backfield to himself. Devontae Parker sort of in that wide receiver 2 range. And then, of course, Mike Gesicki, maybe a guy that takes a hit with Tua starting instead of Ryan Fitzpatrick. But if you are in one of the previously mentioned tight end scrambles and you're 6-6, you're trying to get into the playoffs today, of these guys, Mike Gesicki, Dallas Goedert, Noah Fant, where do you want to go at tight end? I think we should just rank all 3 because I think there's a pretty clear preference for Dallas Goedert in this particular room.
There is, and I'm laughing because I wish I had these options in my home league. I traded for Mark Andrews and don't have Mark Andrews. According to the reports this morning, I thought today was 10 days, but it sounds like, or Tuesday would be 10 days, but it sounded like he's going to miss by like a day, and it's definitely going to be out again this week. But who knows? We might get more information. So I don't even have these. It would be Goddard. After that, Gesicki might have been in the conversation if Fitzpatrick was still starting, but I'd moved him down to what Beller just brought about, like Trey Burton. I'd have him in the Trey Burton range, and I wish I had a Trey Burton, Dalton Schultz to pick up. I don't even have those.
How about you, Beller? If you can't go Goddard there, is it Fant or Gesicki for you?
Yeah. I want to emphasize this. So I got Goddard nice and big with the exclamation points, and then in tinier writing, Fant and Gesicki, because that's really what this comes down to here. I would prefer Fant over Gesicki, but again, those guys both fall into the pick him up, hope for a touchdown, cross your fingers, and if you get that, you get that, and if you don't, you're going to be in a pool with a lot of people who are unhappy with their tight end production in Week 13.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Let's move on to the next game today. We got a question first from Christian. Goddard over Robert Tonyan this week in PPR. What do you think about that one, Jake?
PPR, yes. Tanyan's touchdown reliant, and to be honest about it, Tanyan's only had like 2 really good games, and then like a third okay. Like he's been very much all over the map, and for some very low games, Goddard's going to be involved, even with Ertz coming back. So in a PPR, I would still go Goddard.
Yeah, that Tanyan volume is not very reliable from week to week, but he does show some pretty nice big play ability. I think I'm with you, though, as far as how I'd handle that situation. Let's talk about the Giants and Seahawks. We talked about the backfield just a few minutes ago. I think the big question in this game for me is, which Giants are you willing to start with Colt McCoy at quarterback this week? I mean, this could be a pretty ugly situation without Daniel Jones. Not that it was great with him, but this has to be at least a little bit of a downgrade. So I'm just curious, as far as your typical season-long leagues, which of those Giants that we have been relying on in recent weeks are actually still in your lineups today, Brandon?
Don't feel good about any of them, but I think Sterling Shepard is somebody that I would be willing to throw out into my lineup. Evan Ingram, just because they've been very intent on just giving him volume. It hasn't always worked out efficiency-wise, but right now, this year with this tight end crop, you'll take a tight end that's getting attention. So those are the 2 guys. I actually am just outside of the RB2 range with Wayne Gallman, who I know has been a touchdown machine, but I just don't like the setup for Gallman. I'm worried that they might get behind and he doesn't get a whole lot of volume. May not be able to get a touchdown here. And if he doesn't get a touchdown this week, that's kind of going to kill his value.
Yeah, I don't like the script at all with the Giants being pretty big underdogs in this game today. We mentioned the Carson Hyde situation. Is Hyde really that much of a threat to Carson the rest of the way? I mean, I could see him being an occasional vulture, Jake, but is there really any reason to think Carlos Hyde's going to get more than a handful of touches in any given game at this point?
I think they might keep him, not like last week, but maybe keep him on the 40 side of a 60-40 just to keep Carson healthy down the stretch. Like when you have Carlos Hyde, when you have the other options, and Rashad Penny sounds like he might come back next week, this backfield is starting to get really clustered over here. But I just think you're going to keep pieces involved just to not hurt Carson. Again, Carson has one of the highest injury histories of most running backs playing right now. So I don't know that you need to roll a Carson out there for 70 to 80% of the touches, but more than anything. So it's going to be tough. I don't think you can start Carlos Hyde, but where Chris Carson maybe most weeks would be, top 10 running back, maybe he's going to be like a low end RB1 the rest of the way, which you're happy about, but he's just not going to be that, high upside 80% of like the Ecklers and James Robinsons of the world.
We've got quite a few lopsided games on the slate this week. Another one between the Jags and the Vikings. Of course, the Vikings are a 10-point favorite in that one. Plenty of offense expected, of course, on the Minnesota side. But let's start on the Jacksonville side. DJ Chark is back after missing last week. We were, as a community, a bit wrong about how the Jags receivers were going to perform without him last week. So behind DJ Chark, who is the next guy that you would consider in Jacksonville's passing game this week, Beller?
I suppose I would lean toward Shenault still here just because of the way that they try to get him involved. But really, this is a desperation situation. I'm not really considering anyone beyond DJ Chark, and I'm not even considering DJ Chark at a level where I typically play him. I'll give you a real-world example. In one league, I'm playing both Jarvis Landry and CeeDee Lamb over DJ Chark. I just think Mike Glennon's really going to hurt that offense, even though it didn't necessarily happen last week. We also saw a decent enough week out of Jake Luton in his first start, and then we know where things went from there. So I'd be trying to avoid this entire offense except for James Robinson.
Yeah, James Robinson, very chalky again, and for good reason, just proving that he's game script dependent at this point, or independent. He just gets the touches regardless of what's happening in that offense. Dalvin Cook versus Alvin Kamara in a PPR league, Jake. I mean, if you're looking at kind of we talked about this before the show a lot, a situation where either you're building a DFS lineup or you're playing everybody once or twice over the course of the season before people are gone, is there any sort of edge or interest in Kamara after two really disappointing weeks with Taysom Hill getting starts at quarterback?
I mean, in DFS, no, because the price is still too high. Like, if you want to tell me Dalvin Cook, even in seasonal, Dalvin Cook versus Kamara in PPR, plus Latavius Murray, I'm still taking Dalvin Cook. This is what we're talking about is, a lot of teams don't try to run 20, 30 times against them, but the Falcons' run defense is okay, similar to the Panthers' pass defense being okay. It's not great, but it's average. So where you attack them, it's double down. It's because the other side of it is so weak that you attack it to begin with, and then it's already, that much more successful. So I think Kamara is not even an RB1 conversation this week, and I'm not trusting him in DFS. Again, he's going to have to do it on 12 carries. He's not getting any use in the passing game.
It's so weird to me, though, because it seems like the way he runs routes would be fine for the way that Taysom Hill is limited as a quarterback. Like, why is he not a part of the passing game right now? Is there anything you've seen these last 2 weeks that makes you believe that that's truly the pattern going forward, Beller?
I think that they have to get him more involved. I think you have to go back to the drawing board. I'm a little bit more bullish on Kamara than Jake is this week, especially since we're talking about a Falcons defense that just saw the Taysom Hill Saints offense 2 weeks ago. I think we're going to see a little bit different of a game plan here. I think you have to get Alvin Kamara involved. You take that first game, they're getting their feet wet with Taysom Hill. Last week was a total throwaway game against the Broncos and Kendall Hinton as the starting quarterback, if you can even call him that. I think we see a different set of plays here from the Saints this week. And I know that's asking you to have a little bit of blind faith, but I think with what Sean Payton's done in his career, he's a guy who has deserved some of that blind faith. So I feel actually pretty decent about Kamara getting more involved as a receiver than we've seen so far with Taysom Hill as the starter.
All right, let's get to a few questions, help some people out as they try to make it to the fantasy playoffs in their leagues. First question here comes from Christopher in a PPR league for the flex spot. Choose one out of Devontae Booker, Deebo Samuel, and Myles Gaskin. Some pretty nice options there. What do you think, Brandon?
I would follow the volume with the running backs here. As Jake mentioned, Gaskin's probably getting 20, close to 20 touches. I think you can say the same thing about Booker. I might lean to Myles Gaskin because of those two. I like the matchup a little bit better for Myles Gaskin. So give me Gaskin just slightly over Booker. I like Deebo Samuel. Maybe pulling some Trayvon Diggs. Brandon Ayuk's back. Maybe that's going to give me a little bit of a pause to throw him into that mix.
Plenty of volume expected for Gaskin.
What's that?
Booker by a mile. I have Booker as RB12.
Wow.
I don't love the matchup. People have been kind of overlooking the Jets as a decent run defense all year long.
They've allowed almost every running back to touch the ball 20 times. So, like, even it's funny, and I'm not like coming for Brandon, but Brandon makes the counter argument
Yes,
that
you are.
I against the Falcons run defense when I said it's better than people realize. And he's like, that's because nobody runs on them. And I was like, you can make the same argument for the Jets. It's like, because nobody wants to run on them because the Jets defense is terrible. What's the difference?
No, I've never made that counter argument on the Falcons. I just said they're a pretty good run defense. I've never said anything about volume with them. I believe the Jets have decent talent up front as well. Part of the problem with the Jets is some weeks they don't look like they're interested in caring, and that's you just never know with the Jets what you're going to get. But I have a feeling that Booker, I like Booker, and I have them ranked right next to each other, so I don't have a problem if you want to go Booker over Gaskin. But I worry a little bit that Booker gets like the Alexander Madison in the featured role thing where everybody just all hyped about it. And because he's looked good as a backup, and then it doesn't quite look as good once he's actually in the featured role. And I just think back to Devontae Booker in Denver, and I thought he was just a jag. I just thought he was just a guy. And he's looked better this year, so we'll see if he carries that over to the starting job.
Jalen Richard should be back. I wonder what kind of role he's going to have, Jake. I mean, based on where you have Booker ranked, you're not very concerned about Richard doing much other than maybe catching a few passes?
Yeah, 49th.
Yeah, so he's pretty buried at this point. Here's a question from MJ on topic. Why do you rank Booker ahead of Miles Sanders?
Who just covered it. 20 touches. He's walking into 20 touches against the Jets defense. Miles Sanders isn't even getting the bulk of the workload. He's giving it up to Boston Scott. They just activated Jordan Howard, so watch him get a rushing touchdown on top of it. Like, it's just volume.
I think Miles Sanders
by the way,
surprised people this week.
By the way,
can't stop the run.
I don't know what rankings he's looking at, but Miles Sanders is 9. So I don't know what rankings he's looking at.
So you are ranking Sanders ahead of Booker.
So you have Sanders higher.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
You have to. I mean, come on. There's probably 20 touches there. And
well, because I got the question in the rankings is like, why do you have? It's funny. It's like if people go both ways with it. Why do you have Miles Sanders so high? Why do you have Miles Sanders so low? But it's like, why do you have Miles Sanders inside your top 10? He's like, the quarterback looks awful. The offensive line stinks. He's not getting guaranteed work. And I said, here's the simple answer. You just said everything about David Montgomery last week.
Yep.
Yeah.
Got a question here from Grant. Must-win matchup. Would you start Kareem Hunt or Jonathan Taylor in a half PPR league? Can we trust Taylor even though the matchup is great? What do you think, Beller?
Like both these guys a lot, and I do want to say Jonathan Taylor's the way to go here with how much I've put down on him this week, but I still lean toward Kareem Hunt. Even last week in a game that was totally dominated by Nick Chubb, and we saw a smaller role for Kareem Hunt. He got 10 carries for 62 yards. I am expecting that Titans-Browns game to play to the 53.5 over-under script that has been set for it by the odds makers, and we know that Kareem Hunt is still going to have a sizable role in the passing game for Cleveland. So every single thing there checks in favor of Kareem Hunt. Like both these guys, think they both give you at least top 20 performances at running back this week, but if I can only have one, I'm going to go with Hunt.
A little surprised we didn't see more from Kareem Hunt last week. He was very efficient on 10 carries, had 62 yards, but just 10 touches in that game, 14 touches the week before against the Eagles. Oh, this one. Come on. Gregory wants to know Murray or Trubisky. I can't believe I'm writing this. I mean, the matchup against the Rams has some people scared. How scared should you really be, though, Jake? I mean, it's got to be Murray over Trubisky, but in what circumstances would you actually play someone over Murray who you ordinarily would not play over Murray?
If I'm building 50 DFS lineups, maybe. That's just really what it comes down to. Like, here's the real truth. You didn't draft Kyler Murray to bench him at this point. And I bring that up because you didn't draft Josh Allen. Everybody talking about the schedule for the next 3 weeks from weeks 14 through 16 to bench Josh Allen. Like, you don't do this. This is the overthinking I said at the beginning of the rankings column. Don't overthink it because it's the playoffs or week 13 you're trying to get in. It's really not different than week 4. You still put your best lineup out there. The concern of Kyler Murray is his shoulder. But even with the shoulder, he's still Kyler Murray. Here's what it comes down to. If you really want to do this, can you wake up Tuesday and see 30 points on your bench for Kyler Murray and feel good about yourself? And I'm not saying that like snarky. I'm saying if you can live with that, then make the play. It's your team. You can play whoever you want. But that's what you have to live with if it potentially happens.
Yeah, I would just say that Kyler Murray has looked rough the last couple of weeks, but the 2 weeks ago, it was the QB 11 finish. So he has been outside the QB 1 range just one time, and that was last week against San Francisco. I think as the number 1 scoring fantasy quarterback through 12 weeks of the season, you got to give him 2 back-to-back bad games before you start to think about doing something crazy like switching him out for Mitch Trubisky. So I do have Kyler Murray ranked 9th this week. I have Trubisky 13th. So it's not out of the realm of consideration, but I think you owe it to Kyler Murray, the fact that he's been so good for most of the season, to give him another start after one bad game.
Yeah, I mean, I look back at what Russell Wilson did against the Rams in Week 10. 60 rushing yards sort of bailed him out on what would have been a pretty bad day otherwise. But the Rams' defense is great. I just feel like they've also seen some pretty bad quarterback situations and really feasted on those. I still think you're going to get 18-plus from Murray. And how much more are you really expecting from someone like Trubisky? Next question here comes from Oscar. Good morning from sunny LA. In a PPR league, I have Snell as my RB2 with Gore as an option. Now, James Conner doesn't look like he's going to go in that Monday game against Washington. Snell should be the lead back in Pittsburgh. Is there any reason to play Frank Gore over Benny Snell, Brandon?
Yeah.
Snell.
Yeah, because the Washington defense is legit, and Frank Gore is averaging right at 20 touches. Adam Gase now has no excuse not to play Frank Gore, and it's like Adam Gase's dreamland world, So it's a good matchup. The Raiders are giving up over 4.5 yards per carry to the running back position. I think these guys are actually probably pretty similar, but I think Gore is maybe a little bit safer given the matchup.
Just like an old truck. 3.7 yards per carry this season. Doesn't do much in the passing game, of course. Volume is there, but
I think he got it. No, he got up to 4 yards a carry on his 18 carries last week.
I'm on Snell in that one. You guys are crazy. I mean, volume hasn't been a concern for Frank Gore all season, and what it's translated to is RB45. I mean, just because he's going to get a little bit more volume doesn't mean. I mean, he still needs a touchdown. I think you're going to get a little bit more out of Snell. Matchup be damned. I'm going with Snell in this one.
I think it comes back to what you were saying about Kyler, though. Like, how are you going to feel after this week if you're trying to get into the playoffs and you?
But we're talking about Benny Snell. If this was James Conner, it's a different story. But
we all watched the Wednesday game. Like, what did you see from Benny Snell?
I'm not holding anything that happens on a Wednesday afternoon in the NFL against anyone who plays in the game.
All right, then I'll hold Benny Snell's career against him. How about that?
I mean, Frank Gore has had every opportunity, and he's RB45 on the season.
That's kind of.
No, he has not had every opportunity because he was splitting opportunities. He's getting like 5 more touches than he was getting, 5-6 more.
He was
touches.
a top 20 running back last week.
Yeah, I mean, he's very conceivably could have 20 carries, and I don't know that Benny Snell will get there.
All right, let's go to Michael's question here. We'll have Beller answer this one. Michael's helping Michael's. 2 flex choices here: Kiki QT, Christian Kirk, or Brashad Perriman. QT's listed twice. I assume that's just enthusiasm for
really wants to
more targets. Which 2 are you playing there, Beller?
The first guy who I'm playing there is Brashad Perriman. I think that's where you get invested in the Jets, you guys, is through the air. Brashad Perriman, 8 targets last week. I think that this is a guy who has that big playability as well, so he's the first guy who I lean to. I think Kirk and Kuti is a fair enough comparison with one another, but I'm still going to go with Christian Kirk here. I just, we're still – the expectation of Kuti's additional targets is still something that we can't necessarily lean on. I think we're all thinking that's going to happen with Will Fuller out, but we're not sure how that's going to divide up, how much more Brandon Cooks is going to get, how much more Jordan Akins is going to get, how involved Isaiah Coulter is going to be, David Johnson back on the field for the Texans. I mean, we're still flying a little bit blind here with the Texans. I would rather trust that I know what Christian Kirk's target floor is going to be, so that's where I would go in this one.
All right, Adam wants to know half PPR, Dallas Goedert or Juju Smith-Schuster in the flex spot. What do you think, Jake?
Juju. It's like Juju, then Juju, then Juju, then we'll talk. Like, it's a tight end. Get out of here.
Tanner wants to know, can we trust Myles Gaskin this week? I mean, I think you can. It comes down to who's your alternative, but he's going to be chalky in DFS. I was looking at the Roto Grinders projections well up over 20%.
Did he jump that much?
He jumped a lot, yeah.
That's interesting. I might pivot back off of him now. I had him in there because on Friday afternoon. Because the news hadn't hit Friday afternoon. He was at like 3%. So now that's but I have at RB20. I would play him in front of Wayne Gallman. To what Brandon's point earlier about Seattle's matchup.
Would you play him over David Montgomery?
No, I have David Montgomery inside my top 10.
So do
Yeah, you love him.
Both of you
Can't
guys
get
do?
enough Montgomery.
Oh, wow.
He's fantasy Detroit. That's the only
volume and matchup, man.
Wait.
Yeah.
It's the only matchups that's better than the Packers. And look at what he just did to the Packers.
Most of it on one carry, too.
Yeah.
Hey,
like
it's
60
the
yards on
Packers
one
and
carry.
the Lions. Good to you, David Montgomery.
Got a few more questions to knock out here as we try and help you get into the fantasy playoffs. What do we got here? We got one from Mitchell. Need a win to get my buddy into the playoffs. It's his birthday. Pick two.
Oh, wow.
Pick two out of Kenyon Drake, Devontae Parker, and David
hard.
Johnson. What do you think, Brandon?
Don't give it to me.
Brandon, while you're thinking, I want to throw this out here real quick. Kenyon Drake. Since the Kyle Murray injury happened, I think it was 2 weeks ago, or was it 3 weeks ago? Whenever
It happened.
Yeah, when it happened, the carries inside the 5 for the running backs were about 1.8, 1.7 per game. Since that injury happened, it jumped to 4 a game for Kenyon Drake. Just to throw that out there while you're thinking about it, I want to give you that little nugget.
Okay. All right. I guess I'll go with the first two because I mean, I don't know what to expect from David Johnson after being out for so long with a tough matchup against Indy with no Will Fuller. I think he's. I would like to just watch and see how he's plugged back in. If it's all David Johnson or if Duke Johnson's still kind of in that mix. So, I guess I'll go with Devontae Parker and Kenyon Drake. I got issues with all those guys now with Tua back into the starting line for.
Well,
Miami
then who would you guys play in their first game back? Here you go. This is Beller and Brandon. There you go. Would you play Gaskin or would you play David Johnson in their first game back?
I'll go Gaskin.
I would also go Gaskin.
Because it doesn't feel like Patrick Laird is the equivalent to Duke Johnson here.
Well, like I said earlier, they refuse to let him run the ball. He's a passing game only.
Right.
Exactly. I think the volume's going to be there more. And, I mean, come on, Cincinnati, come on.
All right, 13 Thoughts has a toss-up here. Half PPR flex, Kareem Hunt or Chase Claypool, Beller?
I'm still going Kareem Hunt here. I think this one's pretty close, but I do like Kareem Hunt. I already sung his praises a little bit earlier, so I'll just say with Claypool, I mean, again, we know if this question were Kareem Hunt or best Pittsburgh receiver, whoever it ends up being, then I might lean toward the best Pittsburgh receiver. I bet one of those Pittsburgh receivers will outdo what Kareem Hunt does, but we're never quite sure who it's going to be. And again, I think we can pretty much lock in 15 opportunities to touch the ball for Kareem Hunt in this game that expect to be pretty high scoring with the Titans, so I will go with Hunt.
Claypool's targets the last 5 weeks, 9, 13, 10, 8, and 9. They have been there.
Well, one thing I'll say about Pittsburgh is they haven't been able to run very well. They've protected Roethlisberger great, and you're just seeing them use the pass, not unlike what they used to do with Brady in his final years in New England, where they would just use the pass as kind of like the de facto run. And so you're seeing Roethlisberger throw 50 times last week and mid-40s the weeks before that. I think that's why you're seeing so many targets. They're not exactly deep targets, but they're kind of using it like the running game because their running game isn't that great.
Let's get back to a few more game previews. We go to the Colts-Texans matchup, and I know there's a lot of love from Beller for Jonathan Taylor. I'm curious if you guys, Jake and Brandon, if you guys actually, A, agree and trust Taylor or like him as much as Beller does, and B, if you have any love whatsoever for Nyheim Hines at this point. What do you think about this backfield, Jake?
Yeah, so I've actually been going back and forth whether or not I would start Kamara or Jonathan Taylor. So that'll give you an idea of what I feel about Jonathan Taylor. Yeah, that's what we're coming down to here. A matchup, Kamara's only getting 12 carries. Jonathan Taylor right now for me is RB14 because the Jordan Wilkins situation looks like he's finally back to what we assumed Jordan Wilkins would be in 3 or 4 touches. Nyheim Hines had his fun, but Brandon brought this up either on Monday's show or Wednesday's show is that, Frank Reich keeps changing his own tune, but, a couple of weeks ago, he's like, that's how we roll. And then he's like, oh, well, I'm concerned about Jordan Wilkins and Jonathan Taylor's looking good. So, do we go with the current evidence and that the game before he got COVID, Jonathan Taylor looked like he was the guy? Yes. Do you know he could possibly get burned? And if you want to sit him, I honestly understand it. Like if you want to sit Jonathan Taylor for Kareem Hunt, for Myles Gaskin in his first game back, if you want to, I understand it. But I think at this point, you go for it for the upside.
I mean, it's a nice matchup for Jonathan Taylor. The Colts have
everybody runs on the Texans. They're in that top 5 too.
Mm-hmm.
But I heard Brandon go oof when I said Kamara versus Taylor.
Me? No, I have them right next to each other.
Surprised Kamara fell that far.
That was DVR apparently.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I think I have Kamara right now, one spot ahead of Taylor, but that could change by kickoff. We'll see. But I'm with you. I actually have Taylor at 14, and it seemed like Frank Reich last week was kind of remorseful that Jonathan Taylor wasn't going to be available. Like they were ready to really, kind of kick that momentum after the week before that and let him kind of do his thing. So I guess the good thing, some solace could be taken from the fact that neither of the other running backs really stepped up in a big way while Taylor was out. So maybe they'll plug him back in there and let him continue on from where he left off. I think Nyheim Hines is still usable. I think we might see a little bit more of him in just a straight up passing role though, and maybe we'll see his carries limited a bit this week with Taylor back.
We could have a little fun with the whiteboards if you guys want to. We've got a fill in the blank here. This is from the Houston receiving corps, looking at it as a flex problem. Kiki Kuti is a blank PPR play than Devin Singletary. Man, I wanted Devin Singletary to get a lot more touches this year. My trust level there is at rock bottom, but full PPR, I mean, I think that is kind of a deep league flex problem that somebody out there might actually have to deal with.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, there you go. No help there, unfortunately. But
what did Funston say? I
said an on par play.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, same chunk of the rankings, I think, if you're stuck there.
Yeah.
If I had to make that call, I think, as Beller was saying before, we don't really know how those targets are going to be redistributed, how deep the tree is going to go. Akins is going to be more of a factor, too. I'd probably go Singletary because of the way I expect that game to play out, too. Just think there's more points to be had there. But
the floor.
Yeah, it's close. Let's get to the next game here. Let's talk about the Patriots and the Chargers. This is really weird because Austin Eckler, I thought maybe they'd ease him in a little bit. I didn't have any fear about playing him where I had him, but is Kalen Ballage basically an afterthought at this point based on what you saw last week,
Yes.
Jake?
Yeah, you heard. Actually, with Beller, I know I got a different question for Beller. So, yeah, I think that Ballage is back to irrelevant. The only thing that you would say is look at last week's Joshua Kelly's work, and maybe he gets that because they were using him over Joshua Kelly. But is that correct? No, Isaiah Coulter today?
Ooh. Yeah, just saw when I was off camera, the Texans put it out. Texans PR put out the official inactives, and Isaiah Coulter inactive. That's a surprise right there, you guys.
This is a family show, so I just want to say the Texans are.
Does that change anything with QT that we were talking about before? Is kind of a toss-up, but I mean it's still uncertain.
I think it helps us floor. I think it does.
A little. Yeah, I think there's still some uncertainty there. I think Jordan Akins is a big threat to have a ton of targets, but it definitely helps the floor. Definitely,
yeah,
can't say it doesn't.
Let's go Akins for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Here's another pretty rough sort of flex question: Damian Harris or Denzel Mims in a half-point PPR league right now? Like that is very unpleasant. You going Harris?
It's
Harris.
I would go Harris too. Yeah.
You at the point where you just think he's the guy, like as far as back carries?
It could always be game script dependent, and this is one where I'm trying to predict, and it's not even the game script, honestly. It's more of a matchup. The Chargers have been vulnerable to between the tackles running into the goal line. I mean, they just gave up yards to Savon Ahmed, who had 80 yards and a touchdown, and Frank Gore. Like they're giving up yards to the what do you say, plotters with Frank Gore and Ahmed. I mean, that's honestly so. It's Damian Harris, who I think is better than both of them. It's that between the tackle type of running back that do well against them.
Yeah. I thought Beller was going to jump in with something.
No, I agree. I'm with Jake. And like Denzel Mims, we're excited about what he does, but last week we're excited about 4 catches on 8 targets for 67. I mean, you're still trying to maximize maybe 8 targets, and there's reason to be excited about that in certain contexts, but I don't think it's versus Damian Harris where you're finding the reason to be that excited.
Yeah, with Harris, what do you guys see? Like 15 carries unless the game script gets completely out of whack and it's just a ton of James White catching passes.
It's unlikely to do. I don't see the Chargers running away from the Patriots in this one.
Yeah, I don't see that really playing out that way either. Let's get to the Lions and Bears matchup. The Lions backfield, it's been a trouble spot for us at various points. Unfortunately, DeAndre Swift just sounds like he's having some post-concussion complications. At this point, the Lions have nothing to gain by pushing him out there. So I want to start with Kerryon Johnson and Adrian Peterson. What do you make of this backfield? Looks like Akeem Hicks is going to go today, which changes a lot for the Bears' run defense. With Hicks, they're a great run defense. Without Hicks, you could run all over them. So is this a backfield that you guys are trying to avoid this week, Brandon?
Generally, yeah. I mean, I think if I'm going to lean one or the other between Adrian Peterson and Kerryon Johnson, I'll lean Johnson, who had put up some nice numbers in the air last week through the air. And that's probably low upside, but serviceable. I could see Kerryon Johnson being there. I think Adrian Peterson kind of touchdown dependent in this one. So if I have to pick between the two, give me Kerryon.
You on the same page, Jake?
Yeah, I got nothing really on this one. This is just bad. I'll go with Brandon's answer, really.
All right, let's talk about the Lions receivers. Marvin Hall is going to be out of the picture shortly. I don't know if they've officially made the move, but it sounds like they're going to get more of a look at Quintez Cephus, which, look, if you're the Lions, evaluate players for the future. Figure out if you have anything there. Is Cephus someone you should be picking up in deeper leagues? I mean, how do you compare him to, say, Colin Johnson, who surprised us last week in Jacksonville with DJ Chark out, Jake?
I think the bigger thing here is people are forgetting that Danny Amendola is back. I really like Danny Amendola has been the release valve, the safety blanket, whatever you want to call it, for Matthew Stafford. And the one thing that might get overlooked in this, and Beller put it in the chat, is that Akeem Hicks is back. When Akeem Hicks is on and off the field, it's crazy how much one player can do for a Bears defense, but it's drastic. And if you're looking at Stafford trying to get the ball out quickly, yeah, I think Cephus in a deep league. But at this point of the season, we kind of saw Cephus earlier. We saw him obviously in week 1. He's a deep league player. I think Amendola is kind of in the Kiki QT conversation, and nobody seems to notice that Danny Amendola is active.
Yeah, could be easy, cheap 6 or 7 targets right there for Danny Amendola in this Lions offense. Pretty low over-under at 44.5, but not terrible, not an unplayable game. As far as the Bears receivers go, we see at the bottom of the screen Allen Robinson officially active today. Brandon, is there anybody behind Robinson, whether it's Darnell Mooney or Anthony Miller, someone that you actually want to throw out there in this matchup against the Lions today?
Yeah, I was watching that Darnell Mooney injury because, I mean, I think if both Mooney and Miller are out there, then you're having trouble a little bit. I mean, I think you lean Mooney generally because he's getting more of the targets overall, but I was kind of hoping he was out. That would have made Anthony Miller a kind of a fun play. And I'm still thinking about him just because Mooney, he was kind of iffy if he does play. I don't know how healthy he really is. So I think there's opportunity there for one of those guys. I just haven't settled in my mind on who that's going to be. And if I have these guys on my roster, that's probably making me hesitant to throw them out there unless I'm in a really, really tight spot.
Let's move on to the Saints and Falcons matchup. Saints 3-point favorites on the road in this one. These two teams made in week 11. That was Taysom Hill week. I wonder, what are the chances that we see it again in terms of fantasy points? Doesn't have to do it the exact same way, but if you had to put a percentage on it, what odds would you say there are of Taysom Hill repeating his performance from 2 weeks ago? What do you think, Jake?
Is this a whiteboard? I was going to put like 2%. Like just the 2 rushing touchdowns is really what it comes down to. I just can't see him continuing to do this. And against the Falcons, I think he's going to need to pass. And, I'm not as bullish as either the cohorts over here on Alvin Kamara, but you would make sense that you just got to get your best player more involved. Michael Thomas had his nice game with that Taysom Hill in that first start. So I expect Michael Thomas to be startable, but unless Taysom Hill really opens things up, if you're the Falcons, how do you not just kind of almost just spy Taysom Hill in this game?
Right, especially after just getting roasted by that game plan 2 weeks ago. You just saw it.
You just did, yeah.
I think that's the reason why I'm a little bit more optimistic about Kamara than you are. Same. And I think that's where, Beller and I talked about this earlier in the week where Sean Payton has to have a wrinkle. He can't use the same game plan he just used in week 11 and have it work the exact same way. And if the wrinkle's Kamara, that's a pretty nice wrinkle to have.
Jameis Winston time.
I'm never a conspiracy theorist. A couple weeks ago, I wasn't convinced that Taysom Hill was actually going to start and play the entire game. Proven wrong on that. We saw it again last week. But what we saw last week in Denver in one of the weirdest NFL games that's ever been played.
Kendall Hinton. Oh, they're both going to be on the field at the same time. Taysom Hill's going to run out wide, and Jameson Winston's going to take a snap.
What's the difference than doing it with Breeze? What's the difference, right?
I mean, why not?
You could argue that the Saints have lost a little something by not having Taysom Hill available as a receiver, couldn't you? I mean, he's not the greatest receiver in the world, but like, there's a little something there. There's a little something in terms of what he actually brings. There's a little something in terms of misdirection for the opponent. Like, I just think we have to see a different brand of Taysom Hill-led offense this week than the one we saw 2 weeks ago. I mean, the Falcons aren't, powering their way to the playoffs, but they're not some pushover. They're not some team you can just roll right over. I mean, the Saints are only 3-point favorites, I believe, in Atlanta, and I believe it's also an even, and so you're actually getting a little bit less juice on that. So it's almost like odds makers are treating that as a 2.5-point spread. Like, I think we're going to see a very different Saints offense this week than we did 2 weeks ago.
You got Julio active, dealing with the hamstring injury. Yep. He's going to go. Todd Gurley's back. He was dealing with the knee injury, so it makes the Falcons a little bit more dangerous as well.
I got a Ryan Julio Ridley stack in a couple DFS lineups this week.
That was the game that Julio left early, too, with the hamstring injury, right? Yeah, Didn't Julio not play the second half at all?
Super cheap. Ryan's ridiculously cheap this week.
Who are you running it back with?
In that game?
Yeah.
Not Michael Thomas if I can, but I'm just you don't always. Yeah, look, here's the thing: is like if I'm going with the Falcons stack, I'm also throwing in their defense too. Somebody, I think, who tweeted it out last week? Somebody tweeted out the Millionaire Maker on FanDuel, and the interesting thing was it was 3 of the things you would think never would happen. They didn't run back their wide receiver and quarterback. They had opposing running backs, and they also had the Falcons defense while playing the opposing wide receiver. So like, it's things that you shouldn't do. So you don't always have to run it back.
No, you don't have to, and you can be rewarded for poor tactics. Like that can happen.
I just like I know it's poor tactics. All I'm saying is like you don't have to, mostly because if you run it back with Michael Thomas, it's just super expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that people are scared of Kamara makes me want to use him as
Alvin
the guy.
Kamara.
Yeah, he's good. He's a good player.
Yeah. Hey, Drew Brees and his 17 cracked ribs will be back next week. It's good.
There's no way that Sean Payton has sat here for 2 weeks and said, we've gotten Alvin Kamara 2 targets and 1 catch for -2 yards. Like, I'm cool with that. There's just no way. There's no way that he's seen the way that Alvin Kamara has been used and has been fine with it. They knew they could get by in Atlanta the first time around with no one having seen Taysom Hill as a starter. Last week, they played like a, almost like an NAIA school in Denver. Like, this is going to be a different game from the Saints. I think it has to be, or they're going to lose. If they
Alvin
run
Kamara
back,
or Aaron Jones.
If they, Aaron Jones.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm like trying to find.
We're talking
I'm
about.
just trying to find your
RB1s.
threshold, Beller, because you're like it sounds like that's outside top 5. So Kamara, Carson, Montgomery, Sanders, Mostert. You starting Kamara over any of those guys? I'm just trying to figure out.
I'm playing Kamara over Mostert. I'm playing Kamara over Sanders. Who was the other one that you said there?
Montgomery and Carson.
No, Carson. I'm playing him over Sanders. Is probably where the threshold is, right in there. I'm playing him over Carson. I'm playing him over Mostert.
All right.
Yes.
I'm going to have a DFS lineup with Kamara. I'm going to have a DFS lineup with Jones. I think they're going to be underutilized. And with everyone's chasing James Robinson in that price range, I'm getting away from the chalk, trying to build different in the tournament, and I'm going to eat this entire box of touchdown squares if Aaron Jones can lead me to a GPP first place finish today. But let's get to a few of these questions. These are some VIP questions that are trickling in. You can tweet at Nando DeFino directly if you'd like to be a VIP.
Tweets or texts?
If you want to be a VIP, you got to tweet at Nando, and he'll work out the details for you.
Yeah, and Nando, tweet out your phone number, and then we'll have people text you, and then
Jake
we'll
will retweet it, and we'll make sure everybody has it. First question's a PPR question: James White or Tim Patrick in the flex spot? What do you think about that one, Brandon?
Now that Rex Burkhead is out, James White looked good with that in that first game of that scenario. So I'm going to go James White. I think he's back to being the guy that we've known from the last couple of years in that kind of role. So feel a little bit better about him.
All right. Pick 2 in a PPR league, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who looks like he's going to go, but it's the Sunday night game, and it's not a certainty. Yep. Kareem Hunt or Myles Gaskin. Oh, Beller, I think this is an easy one. I think you just sit Edwards-Helaire here, don't you?
Definitely. And even if Edwards-Helaire weren't this game time decision in a Sunday night game, I would still be playing Hunt and Gaskin. I think it's pretty clear by now that I love this Browns-Titans game. I pretty much want anyone who is possibly fantasy viable, I want them in there in this game. I do think it's going to be that high-scoring one. And Gaskin is just going to, I mean, no one else is out there. We've got Matt Breida on the COVID list. We've got Salvan Ahmed inactive in this one. It's Gaskin, Patrick Laird, and Lynn Bowden. That's it. That's who's active in the backfield for Miami. He's going to get a ton of work. I feel very good about Hunt and Gaskin being the two out of those three.
Got a question there from Evan. Sterling Shepard or Benny Snell in a full PPR league. What do you think, Jake?
Shepard, because it's full PPR. And it just really comes down to, we know what Colt McCoy is. He's a short game passer to begin with. And it's funny, I talked about this on the Washington Huddle, the local show that I do here. And I said, the offense isn't going to be that much different in a passing game perspective. Daniel Jones wasn't hitting tons of deep balls. Daniel Jones wasn't passing proficiently. The reason we like him in fantasy is like Nando loves him is because he's running. I don't think the offense is going to be that much different. According to Dan Dugan, his Darius Slayton's dealing with something that really hasn't come up on injury reports, but he doesn't look 100%. And again, going back to Colt McCoy, I think you're going to see a lot of passes. If what we expect the Seahawks to have a lead in this game, why we don't like Wayne Gallman is because they should be passing, and that means a lot for Evan Ingram and a lot for Sterling Shepard. I see both of them potentially getting double-digit targets.
Not bad. CFC fan wants to know, full PPR, need 2 Miles Sanders, Raheem Mostert, and Antonio Gibson. This falls closer into the good problems to have bucket. Who sits out of that group for you, Brandon?
I guess it's Raheem Mostert. I guess because of the PPR aspect, I feel like, Antonio Gibson and Miles Sanders have a little bit more upside. I want to be honest. I have all of these guys in my top 12. And I think Miles Sanders is the one that I would say I definitely would start first. And then it kind of comes down to Gibson and Mostert. But Gibson's just been a touchdown machine over and over again. I know it's Pittsburgh, but there's been some success with running backs against Pittsburgh. So kind of feel like I'm going to lean that direction with Gibson.
All right.
Where are you guys on that? Are you guys kind of in the same? I mean,
same. Yeah, same. I don't feel great about sitting Mostert, even though you're sitting him 4, but that's the way I would go.
Full PPR, I would actually sit Sanders.
Oh, wow.
I've seen too much, Jake. Seen too much of that Packers defense just getting run.
I have too. I've also seen too much of Doug Peterson turning back into Doug Peterson. Ever since Sanders got hurt, he has not used him the same way, and it's frustrating. I'm not saying it's right. It's just frustrating.
But this was about the time last year when he just flipped the switch and turned Sanders loose.
I hope so. But see, like when you have those options, I just feel like you have such a solid floor with Mostert and Gibson. If you want to sit Mostert because he only gets 2 or 3 targets, I'm fine with it.
I think that is what separates him from that group for me as well. It's just that role in the passing game really isn't there. Brett's in a tough position this week. Needs a flex between Allen Lazard or all your guys.
Neither of them catch the ball.
Time, Frank Gore. Yeah, not a great PPR situation to be in. So, do you take the guaranteed carries from Gore? I mean, I know you guys love the volume there.
I think you just answered it. Really.
Those guys love the volume. Wait,
no.
Those guys love the volume.
In the wrong direction. No, GBR just kind of answered the question. This is one of those situations where evaluate your own lineup. If you need the floor, or if you want the floor, you go with Gore. If you need the upside and the ceiling, you go with Lazard. The problem with Lazard is without the touchdown, it's actually a pretty miserable game. So that's why it's that ceiling boom bust. The floor is with Gore. Gore's the floor. Gore's lava.
Gore on the floor. I agree with that. I'm with there. I'm with you guys on that one.
The Gore is lava. One more game preview to get to before we bring on our friend Ed Malyon. Let's talk about the Browns-Titans matchup. Highest over-under on the board, as we said earlier. How is that possible? I do like what we saw from Jarvis Landry last week for what it's worth. And just want to get your general thoughts on this game, Brandon. We talked about Anthony Firkser at the beginning of the show with Jonnu Smith unavailable. Do you think this game actually comes close to that over-under total, or are you the kind of person that would actually hammer the under here because you don't trust one or both of these offenses to show up here?
Well, I have no trust for Baker Mayfield. That has been unwavering, no trust for him all season long. And when I first heard that this was the highest over-under on the board, I was like, come on, there's going to be higher games than that. And I started looking through the slate. It's not a great, fireworks kind of slate this week. So maybe this will end up being right up there at the top. I feel good about most of the components in this game. I think the worry you always have with the Browns is when they can run, they will absolutely run. They're like the Minnesota Vikings. I said this before. You could get a Baker Mayfield that ends up with like 22 pass attempts. If they're just having success with Chubb and Kareem Hunt, I think they're going to do that. And so what could happen in this game is both teams just leaning heavily on their running backs. We know the Titans will do that as well. You could have some low yield passing volume in this game across the board.
Yeah, maybe a game that falls short of the total just because of the clock sort of working against them based on how both offenses function at their best. I guess that's the one way it can go wrong. Jake, I'm going to assume that you wouldn't want to play Baker Mayfield over Ryan Tannehill. Is that a fair assumption?
Well, since Ryan Tannehill is QB7 and Baker Mayfield is QB20, it's a pretty big disparity. Look, there's two things here that I want. I'm glad you brought that up. So I forget who tweeted it. I think it was like Patrick Dorman or Rich Hribar, one of those guys that's into those type of stats. But they pointed out that the 4 games where Derrick Henry has like 3 or 4 touchdowns is that Ryan Tannehill has been a QB 1 and 3 out of those 4. And in the 4th one, he still threw for 300 yards. They just kicked a bunch of field goals. So it's one of those Derrick Henry situations where just because he smashes, it doesn't always hurt, and actually really never does hurt Ryan Tannehill. The other side of it is, I'm not starting Baker Mayfield, but because Kadarius Hodge is out, if you're desperate for a wide receiver and you are looking for a Lazard type boomer bust, Rashard Higgins is now back into play.
Yeah, could be a really nice cheap option if you're looking for some filler for a DFS lineup as well.
Yeah, I said if you're desperate, don't tell them about DFS.
I actually think it sets up for another really nice Jarvis Landry game again. It looks like he's got a little bit healthier, and while they will run a lot, I think there's going to be that, there's going to be a lot of quick hit, options to Jarvis Landry. So I've thrown him out there in a couple of one and done leagues this week.
Yeah, I like that call. I like Landry quite a bit.
Landry or Juju, Brandon?
I think I'm going Landry because I feel like he's just the, Juju's 1 of 3, and I feel like Landry is almost basically 1 of 1. Higgins is in a Lazard sense, but Landry is almost like the Devontae Adams of that in a lower class kind of.
Well, with Baker, he might be 1 of none. So
yeah.
Why do you guys think that the Titans' offense is just misread all the time? Like, if their implied total is 28, you're right. What you're saying before, Jake. A 28-point implied total. There's plenty for Henry and for Tannehill in that situation. If they were implied at 20 or something, sure, you start to worry a bit more. But 4 TDs, you split them evenly. That's a big game from Henry and a good game or a solid game from Tannehill. Plus, he runs a little bit on top of that, so that bumps up his floor too. I mean, what is it about this team that people just can't get right? Is it years of being disappointed by Marcus Mariota and mediocre offenses that they've been throwing at us? Like, we just haven't recovered from that yet, because this is who the Titans have been since the middle of last season.
I think that's part of it too. It's perception, as always, is always going to skew things, and it's the efficiency of what Ryan Tannehill was last year. And you've seen efficiency with touchdown numbers, and you have the advanced analytics people out there. And I'm not saying they're wrong, but there's some things like we talked about it. This is the first year, and it's because of DK Metcalf that it's not happening as much as it used to. But if people used to, the advanced analytics came after Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett for the longest time. Like, they have this ungodly efficiency that shouldn't continue. Well, they're football players. They don't care about analytics. Things work for certain football players. Things work for certain offenses. And there's a time and a place for analytics to go back up your argument. But at the same time, you have the perception of the Titans, you have the perception of Tannehill, and you have the perception of they can't keep doing this. And that's why. And they've been lying. Like, they've been looking at all 3 of them and giving the finger to all those statements.
Yeah. And I think you could argue that Tennessee has the most threatening play action, in the league.
Yeah.
When Tannehill looks like he's going to hand to Derrick Henry, people believe that, and I think that leads to efficiency. So when you have the ability and the threat of Derrick Henry in play action, and you also have the ability to move the ball down the field and live in the red zone, Tannehill's probably going to stay efficient. And even though he doesn't have super high volume passing, if some of those attempts come in the red zone and he's throwing 2-3 touchdowns a week and getting big plays to his receivers when the defense is buying in on play action, and that's a recipe that we just seen over and over and over again.
Let's help a few more of our viewers and listeners this morning before we bring on Ed Malyon. Little big man, Jake, you say chase the river with Hunter Renfrow. Do you think he will greatly exceed your ranking of him?
No, because I'm the most aggressive ranker on him out there. I look, if that's really what it comes down. Hunter Renfrow look, I have it 41, and I'll even tell you the next closest. I think consensus has him at 57. I mean, how much more aggressive do you want me to be on Hunter Renfrow? The appeal of this is it's a great matchup, but you just dominate the slot. Jacoby Myers and who's the other one I'm forgetting that did really well? Cole Beasley dominated the slot in this opportunity. So it's still Hunter Renfrow. He's going to have to do a majority on 11, 12 targets. So how much higher do you want him?
You had a little love earlier for Danny Amendola or Renfrow.
It's slot week. CeeDee Lamb, Cooper Kupp.
I love the question, though. Jake, do you think Hunter Renfrow will greatly exceed where you ranked him?
I was trying to ignore that part.
I'm holding him back for myself. Justin writes, Week 13. Thanks for a great season, gents. Parker with Tua never looking his way, or Pittman with Phillip Rivers a little bit banged up. Right, Rivers has been dealing with a bad ankle. So what are you doing in that situation, Beller?
Parker, no question about it. I want to believe in Pittman, and even if we were seeing week over week production from him, I think I would still go Parker here. I know that Tua hasn't had the same connection with him that we've seen from Ryan Fitzpatrick, but I think that's more circumstantial than it is anything. That's clearly not only the best pass catcher in the offense, but the best weapon in the offense. And if they really are going to run away from the Bengals in this one, I think we have to see a big game from Parker.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one as well. I got another question here from Sid. Thanks for doing this, guys. Flex between Drake, Dobbins, or Shepard in PPR, and I need to chase upside because I'm 6-6. So what would you do in that situation, Brandon?
I'm chasing upside with J.K. Dobbins against Dallas. And, look with Ingram and Dobbins out, didn't see anything out of Gus Bus to see that they're going to want to look to carry that momentum. There's no momentum there. I guess the momentum's with Justice Hill, but I don't think that he's going to be a thing going forward with those other guys back. So J.K. Dobbins looked like he was ready to kind of take the mantle as the top dog in this backfield before the COVID stuff. With him back and going against Dallas, I want Dobbins. I think he has the most upside.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one as well. Let's get to this question from Chris, full PPR league with Mark Andrews out. Start Austin Hooper or Dalton Schultz. What do you think, Jake?
Hooper. It's tight end. It's just like everybody passed the top
perfect.
5 or 6. I mean, that's really what everybody top 5 or 6. It really is Hooper is because it's PPR because he's getting some volume and just mentioned it, no Hodge, so there's one less option. So it's just hopefully you get 7 or 8 targets for him.
Next question here is from Shirley. Pick 2 in a standard league out of Gibson, Sanders, Taylor, or Booker. That is
Beller's turn. That's Beller's turn.
Yep, Beller's turn.
Loaded. Gibson and Sanders. Hate sitting any of these guys. Obviously, you're in a pretty good spot with the running backs. Gibson and Sanders, though, for me, just feel like the most bankable of the guys. I believe in Jonathan Taylor in a huge way, but who knows when Frank Reich is going to be the Lucy to our Charlie Brown. That could happen really any sort of week. And Devontae Booker, I do think we're going to see a little bit more Jalen Richard in the passing game with the expectation that he'll be back for the Raiders this week. Gibson owns everything. Sanders owns mostly everything for Philly. I feel pretty good about those two.
All right, next question here comes from Nick. Is it Mitch or Derek Carr?
I laugh because of the next part of it. Need a solid floor. When has Mitch Trubisky ever been a solid floor? Ever.
Solid floor.
Need a solid floor with upside. Yeah, that's. I mean, that
not even at North
Derek
Carolina
Carr.
did he have a solid floor.
And I think the thing that what's interesting about Carr is the floor is absolutely there. It's a bounce back opportunity in a very favorable matchup, right? The thing I've been saying all week is the only thing that's hard about that matchup is having to get in a plane and fly across the country to come play an early kick game this morning. That's about it. Like that's all you're worried about. So is it a unanimous Derek Carr for this one?
Hey, if you want, they're close enough. If you want to,
no, I'm actually. I would go Trubisky. I think we saw a trap door on Derek Carr's floor that we didn't realize was there last week. So suddenly
trap door on his floor.
Trap door on the floor. I think Trubisky is actually as safe as you can get this week against the Lions. So with the rushing upside there as well, he showed decently last. I take. There's more upside there than the discrepancy in the floor, in my opinion, with Mitch Trubisky.
I think there's comfortably more upside with Trubisky personally. 250 and 3 the first time these teams met back in week 1.
Yeah, wow, a show divided. CFC fan wants to know, in a full PPR league, wait for Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's status, can replace with Bell if he doesn't go, or just play David Johnson. I mean, you want to chase that extra volume? Yeah, that's
No, because Darrell Williams could be the pass catcher with how
Yeah.
Le'Veon Bell's looked anyway. So that's not even guaranteed that Le'Veon Bell will get 20 touches.
Yeah, I do think it's gross volume. I mean, David Johnson's basically David Montgomery with a smaller role in the passing game. How has that happened? How 2020 is that? Big Time wants to know Hunt or Booker for this week. I'm going to direct all
Booker.
Kareem Hunt questions
Booker.
at Beller because he loves
Yeah.
the Browns.
Yeah, I'm in the minority here, big time. So you can choose to join me if you want, but I like Kareem Hunt here. I think that's going to be a very high scoring game, and I love Nick Chubb. I mean, you guys, I've been talking about Nick Chubb for a long time on this show, but Kareem Hunt stays involved and he does well with what he gets. So I'm going Hunt there.
Yeah, I actually am with you, Beller.
I'm not. Jake's in the minority.
Yep, I have him close, but I'm with you. I think, what I mentioned, the Browns will run when they can run, and I think they can run on the Titans. And Kareem Hunt's a guy that, weirdly, they like to use around the goal line more often than Nick Chubb. So there's a decent touchdown upside for him as well.
Here's a question from Jamie. With Alexander Madison out for an appendectomy, would his playoff value be irrelevant as Dalvin Cook's handcuff? I mean, I assume we're talking 2 weeks minimum, and more likely 3 to 4. So is there a backup in Minnesota that you guys want to have stashed away behind Dalvin Cook?
Nope.
Mike
just,
Boone? No?
You don't want Mike Boone as
You're
one of
carrying
your 5 or 6
Alexander
bench guys?
Madison. You just cut him loose and pick up Mike Boone? I don't see any
No.
problem with that.
And what about Amir Abdullah? He was getting run too, and he's out there today. And CJ Ham gets the goal line. No, it's a complete full blown committee back there without Dalvin Cook now.
But that's not fully the point. The point is you're already considering the Madison spot dead. If it were me, and it is me, because I have Dalvin Cook in my most important league, the Madison spot is already a dead spot, right? So what I'm doing with the Madison spot, dropping him, picking up Boone, see how the Vikings treat it this week, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, because if Dalvin Cook gets hurt this week, you're not going to want Amir Abdullah over Mike Boone next week.
How do you know that? Until we see today. It could be.
You don't, but obviously Boone is the guy. Boone seems like the most logical next man.
Boone in this
here's the problem. No, but here's the problem. We've seen Mike Boone fail in this role before as well, and we've seen Amir Abdullah get opportunities. What I'm saying is, if this is your only choice on the waivers, I'm going to something like what my point was going to be finished is what I answered somebody in the rankings column this morning. Because there's acres out there, because other people have other options. Like it's not necessarily Mike Boone is the best one on there. So if his was Jamal Williams, Cam Akers, if there's other backups, go grab them. I agree. Like if you're in a 14-team league and Mike Boone's the only one, okay, fine. But I'm just saying there's likely better options out there to stash right now.
Yeah. To Jake's
point. I agree with that.
Like think about how Jamal Williams would be used if something happened to Aaron Jones. 15 plus carries and a few catches. Yeah, we'd see some A.J. Dillon, but it wouldn't be a complete chop like Minnesota would be trying to get by without him. We do say goodbye to Jake at this portion of the show. Jake, the floor is yours if you'd like to have any parting shots on the group for Week 13. Yeah, there you go. All right, buy and check the link. Very succinct. If you need to check the link, theathletic.com/cheat sheet. Best deal of the year. Still going on. 80% off, $1 a month. Jake, good luck in Week 13. Looking forward to doing this with you again next Sunday.
No, you're not. Don't lie.
Contractually obligated to do the show for 3 more weeks, so that's how it works. All right, Jake, we'll say goodbye to you, and we'll say hello to Ed Malyon for a new spin on Brit's Picks. We're going to keep breaking down games with Ed, so we're going to talk about this Bills-Niners matchup first. Good morning, Ed. Looks like things are going really well for you this morning. Yeah. Oh, the microphone. Oh, the mic got him again.
I have, unfortunately, one of the problems of living in your country is my football team, my Premier League team, were playing at 6 a.m. this morning. So I got up at 6 a.m. to watch Crystal Palace beat West Brom 5-1. So there you go.
Getting up
Great.
for then. Hey, there you go. All right.
We'll take it.
Let's talk about this Bills-Niners matchup. The backfield came up earlier on the show. San Francisco's running backs had the 4th most fantasy points on the season as a group. 16 carries last week for Raheem Mostert. But this group's about as healthy as it has been all season. So how many of those running backs do you actually trust in a season-long setting this week, Ed?
Raheem Mostert is my guy. I mean, I think Kyle Shanahan has shown that there's two people he loves in this backfield. That's Raheem Mostert and Tevin Coleman. Tevin Coleman can't stay healthy. Raheem Mostert, when he's healthy, seems to get the bulk of the carries. Jeff Wilson is such a good waiver wire pickup on those weeks when there are injuries because he really does come in and take a huge load. But for me, it's all about Raheem Mostert in San Francisco, and I managed to reactivate him for my dynasty playoffs this week.
Now, the follow-up question I have for you, Brandon, is of the San Francisco running backs, obviously Mostert is a guy you're playing this week, but who is good enough to stay on your bench? We were just talking about that situation, in Minnesota with Alexander Mattison going down. Like, is there enough ceiling in any of the other San Francisco backs now that the group is starting to get healthy to stash any of them away, or do you use that bench spot elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, Ed said that, Shanahan loves Tevin Coleman. I think he likes him in a we should just be friends kind of way. But I think he legitimately loves Mostert. But if Mostert were to go down and everybody else is healthy, we know that Jerick McKinnon is just going to be a satellite back. They're not interested in making him a featured guy. That's why we've seen JaMychal Hasty and Jeff Wilson and Tevin Coleman step up. So I think you keep Tevin Coleman around as kind of the insurance play there. If Mostert goes down, everybody else is healthy, you're probably getting the most work out of Tevin Coleman. And he's the one guy that I would care about in that situation. But hopefully Mostert's back to stay. Love him this week against the Bills.
I want to ask you about just the Buffalo side of this matchup a little bit. I mean, you look beyond Stephon Diggs. People are expecting more from Gabriel Davis. It was Cole Beasley who actually threw him a touchdown pass last week. Where does your trust level fall with the non-Stephon Diggs pass catchers in this Buffalo offense right now?
I mean, how can you? We've had some weird weeks as well with this Buffalo pass catching core. As you say, Gabe Davis, Isaiah McKenzie as well has popped up at different times. I don't love it. I love Josh Allen for the fantasy reasons. I don't love Josh Allen as the player, but I think he's probably the second guy after Diggs that I like the most in this whole offense. Then maybe Moss and Singletary, and then it would be the next receiver. So nothing really there for me. Even Dawson Knox is someone that I think twice about playing. So I don't love this Buffalo offense at all, especially not against San Francisco.
Here's a toss-up for you guys, a whiteboard sort of question. Feel free to just blurt out the answer if you don't want to write it down. But Devin Singletary or Le'Veon Bell in a PPR league. We're talking deep league, 14 teams, flex spot, just trying to find as much value as you can this week. And that, of course, comes with the unknown with Edwards-Helaire, not Bell. That's a good way to look at it, I think.
Yeah, I think the nice thing here is you're talking about two guys that play late. We're talking about this CEH illness and whether he's going to play or not. It sounds like he's probably more likely that he will, but at least you get to wait and find out. If it's CEH sitting, then yeah, I guess I would take Le'Veon Bell. But if CEH plays, it's not a straight platoon in Kansas City. It's Le'Veon Bell as a pretty clear backup. At least with Singletary, it's a straight platoon, and I feel better about that even in a tougher matchup.
Yeah, I don't know, but Bella's had one startable score all year. There was this world when he signed where you wondered if he was going to be the 1B to CEH or maybe even overtake the guy if he'd had a tough start to his rookie year. He's a pure handcuff for me and nothing more at this stage. What interests me more actually is kind of what this situation we've seen and how that rolls into next year for him, because he could have gone somewhere where he got more work, I think, at the end of this season, and he went to Kansas City to try and win a Super Bowl ring, which is completely understandable. But I don't know what Le'Veon Bell's year looks like next season now, because I don't know if anyone's going to sign him to take the load, because he just hasn't shown at any point this year that he's kind of fast enough, got the burst to take a whole load for a team.
I think Bell and David Johnson, who came up on the show a little bit earlier, are both at that stage of their career now where they're timeshare backs. Maybe they're guys that are starters to begin the season for a team that drafts a lead back and then they lose the role over the course of the year, something along those lines. But I think their days as starters are basically over. For David Johnson, he's got 4 more fantasy weeks to help us remember the good times before he just becomes an afterthought in a lot of leagues. Let's talk about the Washington Footballs matching up with the Steelers for a Monday matinee. James Conner's not expected to go in this one. We talked about Benny Snell a little bit earlier. I know Brandon is very leery as it pertains to Benny Snell. What do you make of this Pittsburgh backfield, Ed?
I like Snell's opportunity here for sure. He's actually a player that I traded away. I don't really like either of these young Pittsburgh guys. I think Snell and McFarland, like none of them have shown me anything that make me think they're going to be a long-term fantasy asset. I think obviously he's a spot start, and you can go with Snell this week. He's going to get a lot of work. I think Washington have a stout defensive front. I think it's one of the kind of the things that people have learned this year is, yeah, that's not a good team, but their defensive line is really, really hard to come up against. And the Steelers versus the Washington football team sounds like one of the most ugly games you're probably going to see this week. I think Snell can get some points. I think Snell will definitely get the volume that you have to start him. But I don't love it from a talent standpoint. I don't love it from like a huge score point of view either. I think he's going to be between 9 and 14 points.
I always bring up Gio Bernard and Boston Scott as guys that became more fantasy relevant because of injuries earlier this season. I think you'd probably rank him a tick below those guys, where those guys have typically been with expanded opportunities given some of the uncertainty in that Pittsburgh offense. Now, I got a question for both of you guys. It's a whiteboard question. I want you to rank the 3 top Steelers receivers in a PPR setting at this point. It's something that I think I've been wrong about almost every turn this year. It seems like Deontay Johnson specifically is the guy that I have whiffed on the most, and I don't think I've seen any week where Deontay Johnson has had as much shade thrown at him as I saw after that game against the Ravens. So I got Brandon there. You got Deontay 1, Claypool 2, Juju 3 in the PPR league.
I just used the permanent marker on my whiteboard, so I've stained the whiteboard. It's not a dry wipe. So I'm going to agree with Brandon's rankings and let him take one.
Yeah, I think the PPR pushed me to Deontay. In a half PPR, I'm going to put Claypool number 1. I think he's the best of the standard PPR middle ground. But yeah, you just watch the games. It looks like they're clearly intent to try to get Deontay Johnson the ball more often, and just the way they're running things now. Again, I go back to what I said earlier about how Roethlisberger threw over 50 times last week. He's been in the mid 40s of late. You look at his yards per attempt. A lot of his recent games are under 6 yards per attempt. They're using this passing game now as a de facto running game, and I think that's just going to favor in terms of volume Deontay Johnson, because he can hit those quick slants, those underneath routes. He's really good at them, and I think they're trying to mine that right now.
Yeah, I do think that's something that boosts up Johnson's floor quite a bit. I think he bounces back in a big way here against Washington. Let's talk about the Eagles-Packers matchup. Packers 8.5-point favorites. Nice over-under total in that one at 48.5. Zach Ertz coming back for the Eagles. Ed, you've been the tight end whisperer for us this season. Got to ask you, how concerned are you about Goddard with Zach Ertz back in the fold for the Eagles?
I'm pretty worried if I'm a Goddard guy, because he's only had like 3 fantasy relevant weeks all season, to be honest, where he's actually put up points that you'd be happy about, like Richard Rodgers, Greg Ward, Travis Fulgham taking targets and receptions off him. Ertz might not be coming back in a big role, and I think the coaching staff actually acknowledged that this week. They said that they're going to ease him back in. Obviously, their season is kind of done. I mean, if you believe they're still in the NFC East race, then fine, but like watch the games. So like if Ertz comes in and takes 3 or 4 targets off Goddard, that's already kind of worrying for me, because Goddard, like, I know Jake has him as his tight end 5, but I'd have him as a back end, like tight end 1, tight end 2 sort of picture this week. I just don't like him with all this competition, and it's a bad quarterback situation. I think anyone who watched the Eagles last week, the Carson Wentz thing has to stop.
I wonder if they're actually going to make that move before the end of this season. It sounded like there were some rumblings that could have happened going into Monday night. If it didn't happen then, I don't know if it's going to happen.
It's so easy to do, though. You drafted a guy in the second round. I mean, like, at least just take a couple of games to have a look at him. When, like, the way that the offense looked last week was so putrid, and it was so obvious, I think, to everyone. They're talking about Hurts coming in, and he comes in for a couple of snaps. Like, let's see him for a game. Pretend Carson Wentz is injured or whatever you need to do, but like, we've got to get someone else in there, because this offense stinks.
It's a big gap right now between Carson Wentz's actual fantasy output, though, and how he's playing. Yeah. Obviously, the turnovers are a big part of that, but the rushing TDs have really carried him. And if you've been starting him, it's turned out better than it probably should compared to how he's actually playing. Now, Beller, I know you're a little more optimistic about Dallas Goedert. Is the key for you that the Eagles could just run a ton of 2 tight end sets and have Goddard and Ertz coexisting and letting those guys basically function as the top 2 pass catchers in this offense?
Yeah, it is, and it's something that we've seen from them. I mean, it's something we saw from them going back to last season. It's something we've seen from them really all of this season. Ed mentioned that Goddard has only had 3 useful games, but one of those came with Zach Ertz out there back in week 1, 8 grabs for 101 yards and a touchdown. And you look at what Richard Rodgers did last week, 6 targets a week ago, 3 weeks ago, 3 games ago, he had 5 targets. So I think Zach Ertz can slide into that role, and you still have Dallas Goedert getting 10 targets last week, 6 targets the week before, 6 targets the week before that. I just don't think this team is in any sort of position to not get 14-plus targets thrown at both Ertz and Goddard combined. And so I think as long as we have a 6 to 8 target floor for Dallas Goedert, he's going to be just fine. I'm starting him with confidence in multiple leagues this week.
Ed, before we let you go, any last thoughts here on Week 13? Any hidden gems, any players that you feel really good about given their matchups?
I've actually just spent kind of my preparation time for this trying to work out what on earth I'm going to do at tight end in my dynasty league. Just had to pick up Dan Arnold off the wire, who is I mean the other options tight end. So I have 3 tight ends, and Jonnu Smith is the one I'm looking to start. He's out injured, obviously, and the options on the wire were Darren Fells, Richard Rodgers, Tyler Eifert, Tyler Croft, Jack Doyle, Adam Shaheen, Mercedes Lewis, and Dan Arnold. So Dan Arnold coming through big in a playoff spot is all I'm thinking about today.
Well, I hope he finds the end zone for you. Just
that is beautiful.
That is ugly. Well, Ed, looking forward to catching up with you again next week. Thanks for dropping by and sharing your insights as always.
Cheers. See you next week.
That's Ed Malyon with the latest installment of Brits Picks, brought to you unofficially by Sharpie. We'll try to get that endorsement for next week, since rest in peace, Ed's whiteboard. Let's get to a few questions here, and then we will knock out a few more game previews along the way. Let's go with this one from Lonzel. Is it Kalen Ballage or Jerick McKinnon? If you guys are just throwing a dart at running back, I would try to go to the wire and see if there's anybody else out there. But if those are your only 2 options, who do you go with, Brandon?
I guess I go with McKinnon. I think with Austin Eckler back, where's the upside with Kalen Ballage? And I think the San Francisco game, I think the San Francisco offense can actually put up some points against Buffalo. So I'm going to go with McKinnon, hope for a big play upside, but that's kind of the best you could hope for of these 2, I think. So might as well chase that.
All right, one more question here before we start talking about some players we like on Jock Market. Odin Thorman wants to know Snell versus Murray versus Moss. What do you think about that one, Beller?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, part of me wants to get behind Latavius Murray, but I've been beating the drum way too much, saying the Saints have to do something different this week to really fully believe in Latavius. And I also think that what we saw from Latavius last week with the big game, a lot of that came once the Saints had that game comfortably in hand. And I think there's a larger role for him to play in a Taysom Hill offense, but not exactly what we saw last week. I don't feel great doing it, but I think Snell's got the most bettable volume of these 3 guys. And because of that, because of the low ceilings for all 3 of them, that's the direction in which I would go. Benny Snell.
Get to a few more questions here in just a few minutes as we try to help as many people as we can. First, let's talk about a few players that you like on Jock Market this week. Beller, if you haven't got it already, be sure to go to the App Store, get the Jock Market app, and start making money this week. We're always looking for undervalued and overlooked players, guys who will exceed expectations based on their IPO. Who are you going after this week, Beller?
Yeah, well, if you have been with us for the balance of the show, you're going to hear a lot of familiar names. Let's start with Jonathan Taylor. He is one who I'm going after largely because of the fact that I think he's going to be undervalued in this game. Go back to the last time we saw Jonathan Taylor out there for the Colts. It was 2 weeks ago. 22 carries for 90 yards, 4 targets, caught them all, 24 yards. That was a game against the Packers, and frankly, with the way that defense has played, you would hope to see a little bit more than 90 yards on 22 carries. But we look at this Colts backfield, it's a little bit of an unconventional situation, and I take a lot from the fact that he got those 22 carries and basically made both Nyheim Hines and Jordan Wilkins irrelevant in that game. Then last week, it was a game where the Colts fell way behind the Titans early, but still, 10 carries, 29 yards for Nyheim Hines, and an even less efficient game out of Jordan Wilkins. So I think now getting Jonathan Taylor back, clearly the most talented back in that backfield. I don't think Frank Reich would fight you on that. And the fact that they used him as the obvious lead back 2 weeks ago, I feel pretty good about him in what is a soft matchup against Houston. So I think it's a combination of things that really play to Jonathan Taylor's favor in Week 13 and make him a very attractive player with the way that Jock Market prices out its guys.
As we've said a few times, Browns-Titans, highest over-under on the board.
Yep.
Is there an overlooked player in that game that you're targeting today?
Let's go Corey Davis here. No bad way to get invested in Cleveland and Tennessee, but you're going to have to pay up for Nick Chubb as you should. You're going to have to pay up for Derrick Henry as you should. And I think you're even going to have to pay up for Ryan Tannehill and A.J. Brown as well. Let's go to someone who you're not going to have to pay up for too much. That is Corey Davis. Plenty of opportunity for him in this offense. That really hasn't been an issue at all this season. He's got multiple 100-yard games. Not the super highest touchdown upside out of him with what Derrick Henry does and what A.J. Brown does. I think for what his target and yardage numbers are week in and week out, you would think in most context-neutral situations he would have a higher touchdown upside. But even knowing that, I just think we're going to see plenty of opportunity for him in a game that, once again, I expect to be very high-scoring between Cleveland and Tennessee. A guy who goes roundly overlooked, who I think can easily give you a top 20 wide receiver day.
We talked about Saints-Falcons a little bit earlier in the show. If you're picking your spot in that matchup, who stands out to you on Jock Market?
When was the last time Alvin Kamara was overlooked? I mean, was it when he had to transfer from Alabama to Tennessee? I think that was probably the last time in his entire football playing life that he was overlooked. This is a gift that we are getting an Alvin Kamara that people are down on in Week 13. This is still Alvin Kamara, and I know I've said this a bunch, so I'm sorry if you've been with us for most of the show, but I'm going to repeat it. There is no way that 2 weeks later the Saints can run the same limited Taysom Hill offense against a not horrible Falcons defense and expect to come out of this game with a victory. So I think we see a different look from the Saints offense. I think we see a whole lot more Alvin Kamara, and I don't care who your quarterback is, there is no world in which it makes sense to just eliminate Alvin Kamara as a receiving option in your offense. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life, and Sean Payton is not a stupid coach. So we are going to get, I think, the usual Alvin Kamara sort of workload. 12, 13 carries, 6, 7 targets. A big game out of Alvin Kamara is coming this afternoon. Get ready for it and get in on him cheap. The only week you're ever going to be able to on Jock Market.
Yeah, I am right there with you on Alvin Kamara this week. How about a quarterback that you like today? Someone that might be a little bit under the radar, relatively speaking.
Yeah, Kirk Cousins is someone who we've talked about a lot this week on our entire suite of athletic fantasy podcasts, and this guy just unfairly maligned. I mean, he is delivering week after week after week. Kirk Cousins has been one of the most productive quarterbacks over the last 6 weeks of this season, and I don't think that slows down at all against Jacksonville. The one thing that concerns me is maybe a little bit of the touchdown upside because of Dalvin Cook. Obviously, he's going to seed plenty of possible plays inside the 10, inside the 5-yard line to Dalvin Cook, as he should. I mean, that's just the sort of running back that Cook is. But he gets Adam Thielen back today. Justin Jefferson has really emerged as a go-to receiver. I think you can make the argument that Thielen and Jefferson are the best wide receiver duo in the league this season with how good Jefferson has been. I mean, what a home run of a pick by the Vikings, looking like they've got a new age Randy Moss on their hands. Not quite the player that Moss was, but just going to be really a nightmare for Jacksonville to try to slow down both of those receivers. And it just all redounds to Kirk Cousins' benefit. And you can say what you want about him. Say what his failures under the spotlight, his failures in some big spots. The guy has had a lot of productive seasons going back to his last couple of years in Washington, and he has shown to us that he can command this brand of Minnesota offense. I think he gets you another big one against the Jags today.
All right. Be sure to take control of your fantasy sports experience and download Jock Market now in the App Store, and that includes you, Android users. Let's get to a few more game previews. Let's talk about the Broncos-Chiefs Sunday night matchup. We bring back Brandon Funston to do that. As you look at some of the Denver receivers, who do you trust right now? If you're starting 3 receivers in a season-long league, how many of those Denver receivers are you comfortably putting into a lineup right now, Brandon?
Well, none of the receivers have entered the circle of trust at any point in the season. I think Jerry Jeudy was getting close, and we've seen Tim Patrick have some decent games. And look, I think there's going to be a lot of a stench still coming out of that Denver offense because of the Kendall Hinton thing. But we just got to go back to what it was before. You felt like there was some upside with Tim Patrick. He had some spots there. You feel like Jerry Jeudy is the most consistent for like 60 yards, 4 or 5 catches. And I think we're back to that. So as much as that makes you want to start somebody, I mean, that's where we're at. So it's Jeudy 1, it's Patrick 2, but they're not trustworthy, either of them.
Yeah, I think this could be one of those that volume gets forced, of course, with the Broncos nearly being a 2-touchdown dog. So that generally, there's one that circle week in, week out. Jerry Jeudy would probably be that guy for me as well. Let's move on to the Rams-Cardinals matchup. Got an over-under question for you guys. Cam Akers touches this week. Over-under 13.5. And I will note that his season high in touches is 15, and that was back in week 1. You're going both under 13.5?
Yeah, I want to believe it's going to be over, but we have no reason to believe it's going to be over with the way that Sean McVay has used all three of these backs when they're healthy. I think Cam Akers. I think we're going to revisit Cam Akers in a really fun, exciting way from a fantasy perspective in 2021, and I think he's a very useful player for the Rams in real life. I think he has to be on an upward trend. Given where this team is and where it wants to be headed, I think we have to see a little bit more Cam Akers, but nothing tells us that we should be going over 13.5. Nothing tells us we should be going over 9.5 or 10.5. It would sort of be wish casting, and I'm not going to do that with this backfield.
Yeah, I feel like the line would be more like 8.5, and at that point, I could maybe talk myself into the over, but it's probably a bet I would just leave on the table and completely walk away from it. Other interesting thing in this, Ramsey should be all over DeAndre Hopkins. Is there really anything you can do about it, though, Brandon? I mean, season-long leagues, you're not going to sit Hopkins down. I think it's a leverage opportunity in big field tournaments in DFS because DeAndre Hopkins can produce even in a difficult matchup like this.
Yeah, but I tell you what, it opened my eyes. I called DK Metcalf matchup proof, and man, Jalen Ramsey was great against DK Metcalf. And you just look at the way Kyler Murray's been throwing the ball since we feel like he's definitely sprained his AC joint. It looks like he has. I mean, he's not throwing well. I think the Rams can, what we've seen out of what defenses are doing the last couple of weeks with Kyler Murray is they're not running their rush edges up the field. They're kind of keeping like a shallow bowl around him. And then you got Aaron Donald coming up the gut. I think is going to be a troublesome matchup for DeAndre Hopkins, but I'm not going to rank him outside my top 20, but I'll be honest, I'm ranking him outside my top 12. I think this is, you mentioned it, from a DFS standpoint, he's one I would steer clear of completely.
It's interesting. I'd like him just because I don't think anyone's really on him. So if you're playing a really big field tournament, you want to do something different that still brings unique ceiling. I think he does that, but there are more ways it comes out just kind of in that 12 to 15 point range than 25 plus, or the thing you need to happen to put yourself on a trajectory to win a tournament like that. Let's get to the Raiders-Jets matchup. As I mentioned earlier, a nice get-well spot for the Raiders coming off that flop last week in Atlanta. Devontae Booker, I think you guys are a little bit lighter on him than Jake by comparison. Where does he finish among running backs in PPR leagues here in Week 13? I'll go to you first, Beller.
I'll say top 18. I just don't think that I don't think it's a one-for-one trade with the Josh Jacobs role. That's the one thing that concerns me with Devontae Booker. If I have him, I'm starting him, and I feel pretty good about starting him. But I don't think that it's just, all right, Josh Jacobs is out. We can just port that role right over to Devontae Booker, and let's have some fun. Devontae Booker's good. And we should also mention that one of our Vegas Raiders beat writers, Vic Tafer, has been beating the Devontae Booker drum for weeks now. I just think that we're not going to get exactly that same workload from Booker that we always expect week in and week out for Josh Jacobs. So I feel good about him. I think he's an easy RB2. I think he's got an RB1 ceiling given this matchup and given the way that the Raiders could run away with it. I just am not ready to bet on that being the way that things go for him today.
Yeah, I have him at 16, so I guess I'll say top 16, but I'm kind of in the same rationale as Beller. I would play Jonathan Taylor over him. I mentioned earlier I would play Myles Gaskin, who I have those guys 15 and 14, and I have Alvin Kamara at 13, so I'm still in on Kamara and them figuring something out with him, as you guys talked about, maybe Sean Payton throwing a wrinkle in for the second matchup with the Falcons. But I think Booker, because of volume, even if it's not quite as high as Josh Jacobs is still in that kind of mid-teens range.
We have another question from our VIP line. Mike S. in Jersey wants to know, can Sam Darnold be a top 14 quarterback this week with this matchup and with that group of pass catchers getting healthier? I mean, is there a reason to be optimistic about Darnold in this spot? Do either of you have any reason to want
I got
to use
one.
him?
I got one because there's unlikely to be ghosts in the stadium. And, we know Sam Darnold doesn't like those ghosts, but you look at the Raiders, they get like 1 sack per game. They're one of the least pressure the quarterback teams. And I think that's key for Sam Darnold. He needs to be comfortable. He's got a healthy, group of wide receivers. But I think the only person that would be willing to say, is he top 14 this week, is we have to bring on Michael Salfino because he's Darnold's biggest fan. But I think there is some reason for optimism if you look at the Raiders' ability to pressure the quarterback.
Yeah,
I would throw Sam Darnold out there in a super flex league. Like, I would rather be playing Sam Darnold today than Colt McCoy or Mike Glennon. I'd rather play him than Drew Lock. I'd probably rather play him than Nick Mullins. Like, there are plenty of guys who I could argue for Sam Darnold over top 14. I mean, if he goes top 14, I think we have to have a, COVID-friendly, socially distanced party at the Darnold house tonight.
Let's get to the Cowboys-Ravens matchup. Some good news there. Ravens getting players back. They should have their full complement of running backs. Lamar Jackson should be back for this one, too, according to ESPN's Adam Schefter. So, quick question for both of you guys. Who leads the Ravens in rushing yards this week? I'll go to you first, Beller.
Dobbins. No doubt about it. Absolutely. J.K. Dobbins does it this week, does it every week the rest of the season, and in a dream world leads people to fantasy championships. Brandon said it earlier. I mean, he was taking that job over, at least in as much of a way as anyone's going to take that job over this season before he went on the COVID-19 list, and I think that picks back up this week.
I give Beller's take 2 thumbs up.
More fantasy points this week, Zeke or Dobbins?
Dobbins.
I have Dobbins ranked higher.
That's where we're at. 2020. It's very weird.
Hey, how about 2 Ohio State guys? Just clicks right there. How about that? Buckeye versus Buckeye right there.
Right.
I'm trying to forget Ezekiel Elliott at Ohio State because that was a very painful year.
Hey, J.K. Dobbins wasn't much better for us, Derek.
Yeah, but that was the worst Big Ten championship game I've ever watched as a Wisconsin fan. That was horrible. And Zeke was just running all over them.
Oh, my God. Yes.
Let's get to your guys' survivor picks if you're still hanging around in Week 13. We got lots of big favorites this week, and it's not necessarily the same group of teams that we're usually talking about for survivor. So, Brandon, who do you turn to?
I got to go with my hometown Seahawks. I'm not sure I've used them in Survivor, at least on this format yet this year. So I feel very good about the Seahawks with that improving defense going up against Colt McCoy. They're at home. So I would go there. And if I didn't have Seattle, I'd probably maybe go Miami against Cincinnati.
I think Seattle's going to cover. I think that's a 2-touchdown win against Colt McCoy and the Giants. Come on, they're at home. It's going to be just an absolute beatdown.
I'm knocking on wood right now. I'm not comfortable with this.
I'll do my thing here and say if you have to go off the board, because obviously who the hell knows who anyone has available still in Survivor in Week 13. I like the Bears. I mean, I feel kind of crazy saying it, but the best unit on the field, no doubt about it, is the Bears defense, especially with Akeem Hicks back. No Kenny Galladay. No DeAndre Swift. That's a bad offense for Detroit. I know that we're excited about Matt Patricia being gone, but I think that's something to be more excited about for 2021 than it is for 2020. Bears have a win over the Lions in Detroit from earlier this season, and yeah, DeAndre Swift dropped that one away, but a win's a win, and I think that, again, that the Bears defense can mostly keep this game in check. And hey, it's Week 13. If this were Week 2, I would not be saying Bears over Lions and Survivor, lock it down. But it's Week 13. You probably have to take some chances at this point, and I think that the Bears are among the best of the chances you can take.
I'm stunned that you guys are both on your favorite teams this week, especially with Beller being a Bears fan, but hey, that's how it goes. One last question that we're going to get to, helping out one more viewer or listener before we sign off. It's going to be Jacob's question. Hey guys, desperate for advice. Pick 2 out of Lazard, Higgins, and Kiki Kuti in a half PPR league. So who sits out of that group? I'll go to you first, Brandon.
I'm going to go Lazard, and I'm going to go Kuti. I mean, we know that Isaiah Coulter's out. It's pretty hard to figure out a way that Kuti doesn't get a decent amount of targets in this game. So I like him from maybe the safe play standpoint. Lazard, you figure that, Darius Slay is going to be on Devontae Adams. Maybe there's some opportunities there for Lazard. Higgins, he's just in theory because Kadero Hodge is out. But again, Cleveland, you talk about when they can run, they will run a lot. So I don't know that there's going to be a lot of volume for Rashad Higgins.
Agreed. We are in agreement here. I think Kuti's the easy one. I think this is Lazard versus Higgins. And when we're talking this far down our list of wide receivers, both on someone's team and in the entire wide receiver pool, This comes down to more Aaron Rodgers versus Baker Mayfield than anything, and that is as easy a choice as any of us has had to make in our fantasy football lives.
Yeah. Which offense do you trust more? Which quarterback do you trust more? I think is a good way to sort of make decisions if you're looking at a problem like the one that Jacob has in front of him. Gentlemen, I hope you enjoy Week 13. Good luck to you in your own leagues and with your DFS lineups. Looking forward to doing this again next week.
Yeah, you too. Good. W time. Let's go get them, guys.
That is going to wrap things up for our Week 13 episode of the Athletic Fantasy Cheat Sheet presented by Jock Market. You can take control of your fantasy sports experience. Download Jock Market now in the App Store, and that includes you Android users. Be sure to get all of our written fantasy football content, including Jake's rankings, for just $12 for the first year. It's 80% off. It's the deal of the year. You can get that at theathletic.com/cheat sheet. For Jake Ciely, Brandon Funston, Michael Beller, Ed Malyon, and our man behind the scenes, Nano DeFino, I'm Derek VanRiper. Good luck in Week 13.